took off, why, it was still twilight in England. The planes formed up, flying around the field, and formed up, and then we headed out of there. But we headed west, so we could make a big loop around the invasion fleet that was going in.
Most of the fellows that you talk to that went over that, both Omaha or Utah Beach, either one, it looked like you could almost walk across the ship to ship, at all sizes and all kinds. It was awesome, absolutely awesome.
Weather was real bad, stormy and raining, all of that, and I'm sure that the pilot of that C-47 that we were riding in, when he saw all that flak and all of that, and the flak rattling off our wings that you could hear, you know, and I'm sure that when he got us to a place where he thought it was a good, safe place to jump, he gave us the green light, and out we went.
I was having trouble getting out of my parachute, and then I heard these footsteps coming toward me. So I quickly rolled over and got my rifle out, and I was just bringing it up to aim, and this big cow stuck its head right at me and mooed right in my face. I was glad it was a cow.
And then when it got daylight, we just heard some firing in an area up ahead, and we decided to move up there and join the groups. And then I saw these guys had been hit in the night. And then it wasn't training anymore. You saw the guys had been hit bad, and they were bleeding and laid open and so on. Then you realize this is real stuff here.
The Germans demonstrated the capabilities of an all-out aerial invasion with their attack on Crete, which they managed to capture exclusively with air transported and parachute troops. Ironically, the Germans looked at their losses in Crete and said, never again. The Americans looked at the capture of Crete and said, we need to scale up. So the Americans began the creation of airborne divisions, and they conducted many division-level operations in the war, the most famous of which being the Normandy operation. The night before D-Day, the United States put 2 parachute divisions, parachute and glider, airborne divisions, into Normandy, and the British put in 1.
The naval bombardment, the landings, all of that is designed to overcome the beach defenses. But the next hurdle to overcome is the German mobile reserves, because the Germans can't defend everywhere. So the Germans have central reserves that are designed to counterattack as soon as the Allies come ashore while they're still disorganized. And the principal mission of the airborne troops is to prevent that from happening. The airborne units become the elite infantry of the Army, because once you put those units in to combat and they begin coming apart, they have the ability, the training, and the instinct to begin reassembling themselves under fire and continue forward. And so they have much more ability to sustain combat in a hostile environment than most other people do, just by the unique nature of the experience that they've trained for.
Well, we trained pretty heavy in England. I don't think I ever went through a problem or a CPX exercise that somebody wasn't killed. I mean, there was a lot of casualties. Either the gliders would malfunction, sometimes the plane would take off and pull the nose out of it, and the glider would crash. But so what? It didn't hit us, so we didn't worry about it.
We had intensive training. I remember being on a practice jump in England with Colonel Schwartz. He was an ornery, belligerent type. And a storm came up, a violent storm, rather. And word went out on the radios to cancel flights, come back. And he acted like he did not hear the message. He did, but he ignored it, and he jumped us. And it was wintertime. I remember landing in a cabbage field patch. The cabbages were this big around and frozen like bricks. And with that strong wind, several guys were knocked out, several broke their legs. I think one broke his back.
We spent several weeks, a month, preparing for the drop in Normandy. In the last week, we got word that a German unit had moved into the exact area where we were going to jump in Normandy. So the mission was changed, and we were moved to the area around St. Mary-ad-Lys. It was always amazing to me why the Germans, we always thought they had great intelligence, that is, military intelligence, and they knew nothing about what we were going to do.
The interesting thing about all the security measures is that, in fact, the Germans didn't have a clue that we had mounted a huge invasion force, a huge airborne force, and even with photo reconnaissance and radio intercept, at which they were very good, the Germans never were able to pinpoint and say, okay, this is how many troops are going to come ashore where. Even when they began to suspect there was going to be an invasion, there's no indication they were able to get any idea of the size of the invasion. In fact, they so badly miscalculated, they thought it was a feint. They thought there was another major invasion coming right after Normandy.
Security was really tight. A week before D-Day, and of course they put that thing off a couple times. We were put in a gated, fenced compound that wasn't too far from the base we were at, and you couldn't get out of there.
They put us in this area that, yeah, they took you out of there with armed guards. They had a guard around you all the time. They'd take us out of there to a hangar in the air base there, and they had these tables that were mock-up things of Normandy.
We didn't know where we were going at the time. Then they showed us maps of where we were going without the names. It was only 3 days actually before the invasion that we knew exactly where we were going, that it was going to be France and Normandy.
Eventually, one day we were taken out to the airport, and that was supposed to be D-Day, and if I remember correctly, that was canceled, and we went back, and then went back out to the airport again.
The real problem with the delay is the psychological effect on the troops involved. When you've been building up to something for months on end, you've gotten totally psyched up to go up there and do it, and then suddenly you're told, okay, oh, wait a minute, let's stand down. That's always devastating.
We was ready to go. But when we loaded the planes that first morning and then had to sit there for an hour, then pull out again, then we got deflated, and there was a lot of hard feelings over it.
The planners anticipated that it would be some time before the airborne would be relieved by overland troops. And as a result decided that everything that they needed to fight the battle for the first several days had to be with them, that they had to carry it with them. So in addition to their own personal gear, in addition to their own personal weapon and ammunition for it, they carried a considerable amount of extra ammunition for their own personal weapon. They carried extra grenades. They carried extra medical equipment, extra bandages and medical supplies, because there wouldn't be immediately resupply of that. So there's this whole array of things that are incidental and can be supplied from the rear in most circumstances that if they were going to need at all, they needed to carry with them.
That meant we were just going to have more extra weight. And already when you went to get on a plane, it took 2 guys to boost you to get it in. So you can imagine what it was when we went into Normandy.
You had a full field pack, of course, and you depending on what weapon you carried, you had your weapon. It never bothered me, that part of it, until we jumped Normandy. And then they fastened a British leg pack on, and I'd never heard of them before, let alone being familiar with them. And it got me into trouble.
We were really loaded down. We were packed down with everything you could carry. I had a landmine on my lap strapped to my left leg, my trench knife to my right, yeah, 3 days rations, K rations. I don't know what all we had.
Eisenhower came up and talked to us, and of course I was in the front row. And he was telling us that we could expect at least 30% casualties on landing. And he said, I want you, if you land and land safely, sell your life dearly. I'll never forget that. And, I wanted to tell him then my life wasn't for sale, but I didn't dare tell him that.
Going across that channel was the biggest sight I ever saw in my life. It was a solid mass of ships from one side or the other. I never did hear how many ships they thought was in it, but it was a pileup. The planes that were in the air were just about the same way. It was just a steady drone. Now, we had fighters over us all the way. There was bombers going and coming. And you just think maybe the world's coming to an end or something. It was so big.
The weather was not the best. There was heavy cloud cover. They were just coming off a major storm the day before. There was anti-aircraft fire over the coast. German radar picked up the aircraft coming in. You had, and again, something people don't notice, you had a lot of inexperienced transport pilots too. They were doing a combat drop and a night combat drop to boot for the first time. So you had navigation problems. If you didn't make your turn precisely right, you were going to be completely off. There's nothing to stop you from making a mistake.
Were they frightened? I think all of them must have been frightened. One of the things that must have sustained them was the fact that everybody they were going into combat with, they'd been with for a year and a half, 2 years, through training and maneuvers and exercises and everything else. And if anything got them through that first experience, that must have had a lot to do with it.
I think we were probably more scared now, because we were venturing into the unknown as far as our experience is concerned. But there again, young, and nothing can happen to me. It might happen to the other guy, but it's not going to happen to me.
A lot of them went completely introspective, inside themselves, trying to figure, am I going to survive? Am I not going to screw up? Others would get very loud. And it's not false bravado, it's reaction to stress, extreme stress. And the biggest stress is, how am I going to react? Am I going to do the right thing? Am I going to support my buddy? Am I going to accomplish my mission? Am I not going to screw up?
When the plane took off, it took at least 2 hours to get them all flying around until they get in the right formation. Then you had to go to where you were going. And we went around the Normandy Peninsula and came in from the back side. Well, by the time we got on our way, I went to sleep. And I slept most of the way across. And I woke up and I started hearing that aircraft fire. And you could look out those plane windows and see the tracers from the machine gun fire coming up at us. Coming right at us. Those time those shells got to where the plane was, they were slowed down. They were pretty well spent. And so when they hit that air driven back by the propellers, they would curve. And we started getting those tracer bullets going right through the tail end of the plane.
Oh yeah, we were fired at, and we could hear those stuff popping through the fuselage. I don't know what it was, machine gun fire or shrapnel or whatever. We heard explosions, and we knew we were being fired on. I was rather interested in getting the hell out of there, personally.
Suddenly you stop worrying about the jump itself and landing. And that's completely secondary to the idea that somebody's about to blow the plane apart around you. Not a great percentage of the aircraft were hit. The problem is that it scattered formations. People took evasive action, and thus it contributed to the scattering of the drop itself.
The losses from air defense were more important psychologically than materially. Certainly the incidents of aircraft going down, so many people remember seeing that so vividly. that I think it had a tremendous psychological impact. I'm really not sure that the material impact was anywhere near that significant.
We could see the fire up on ahead of us, you know, tracers and anti-aircraft guns and machine guns, and fires going on down below, and so I don't know how many planes were shot down ahead of us. Our lead plane, the company commander plane, and company headquarters were shot down, and everyone killed. And as that was happening, why, instead of coming in at 500 or 600 feet, why, the pilots dropped way down and took evasive action, which is a natural thing to do. And they gave us a green light. I don't even think we had a red light, just gave us a green light, and out we went.
When we hit the mainland, a 50 caliber machine gun got on us, riddled bucket seats up and down one side of the whole plane. Pilot hollered back and wondered how many guys were hit. We checked off up and down the line, and nobody. He wouldn't believe us. He sent the co-pilot back. He went back, nope, nobody's hit. Well, when this happened, he tipped up on the side and got out of the line of formation. So there's no lights, and he was out of formation. We got strict orders not to go back with the plane, and we told him to fly back in 3 minutes, and we'd go.
We came in over the coast and flew over the coast for a few minutes. And at one time, our plane got caught in anti-aircraft fire, and the plane dove for the treetops. I think that must have been just about where the point where we were going to jump. The plane dove for the treetops and flew as fast as possible to get out of there. And before we knew it, we were over the water on the other side again. I was wondering what's going on there. We going back to England or what? Then the plane turned around, flew over the coast again, inland from the other side, flew a few minutes, and gave us the green light, and we jumped.
You've got a static line, and you hook that onto a cable that runs the length of the airplane, and then you check the guy in front of you to be sure that it's clear of his chute, and you're gone before you realize what's going on. You're so busy getting ready that you don't realize until you're gone.
When we jumped, I don't think we were more than 550 feet off the ground, but I still had a couple bullet holes in my chute. Now, I've seen tracers coming up at other jumpers, but the ones that went through mine, I'd just hear a little zip. That's all the sound you heard when it went through your silk. We ended up about 11, 12 miles from where we were supposed to be, which our designated point was St. Mary Glees.
We landed right where we were supposed to be. By morning, we were very well organized and very well situated. The other regiments had a lot worse landing. Were more scattered than we were.
St. Mary du Mont was where we were supposed to be. We weren't. I was several miles from there. I didn't see St. Mary du Mont until afternoon.
The plane was supposed to be at an elevation of about 500 feet when we jumped, and 300 when the last guy got out. And I was in about the middle of the stick. I don't remember exactly where I was, probably 6th or 8th man back when we jumped. But I remember going out and I had a rifle, carried the rifle in a bag, and I went out of that plane, and my parachute jerked me open and jerked me, and I had about 2 swings, and I'm on the ground. Wham, real quick.
lot of Normandy, to this day, is either very heavily overgrown, the famous hedgerows, but also woodlots, isolated trees, swamp areas, marsh, and any of these are very dangerous to drop into. And then, of course, you're dropping at night. And I suspect there were an awful lot of minor injuries among the airborne troops that got lumped in with the combat casualties for the day, because I knew a lot of paratroopers in the Army, and its injuries are a fact of life in peacetime. Now you're overloaded, coming in at night into rough country, usually into country that is not where you're supposed to be, and you're just asking for injuries.
There was a lot of them that lit in the water and drowned because they had the pockets full of stuff and their guns and so on, and they couldn't swim. And some of the water was too deep, but some of it was shallow enough that they could walk on the bottom and get out of that water. And a lot of them got killed there. A lot of Americans got killed in the water.
We were just getting ready to get on those planes, and somebody came and fastened that leg pack. I don't know what was in it. I couldn't get up into the plane by myself. They had to help me up in there. So I landed with that thing over my head in water. And I couldn't get it off. So here I am like some kind of a fish jumping up to get a breath of air and then go back down. And I'm a non-swimmer. So this it was something of a problem. I did get it loose, and then I discovered that I'm in 7 feet of water here, and it's 18 inches deep here, and it's 18 inches deep here. I'm standing in a ditch. This is the area that the Germans had flooded.
I landed in an elm tree. The canopy of my chute drifted over an elm tree, and when I came down, my back hit the back of the hedgerow, which is always, it was a lot of brush. It's like backing into a cushion. My feet were touching the ground.
When we jumped in Normandy, I hung in a tree. And I couldn't see anybody, I couldn't see anything, but I thought after you're there for a while, your eyes kind of become used to it. You can see silhouettes and stuff like that. And I thought I saw a man. Pretty soon I heard a click, click. And I knew what he had. He had one of those smirk guns. They were, you know, you could shoot multiple shells. And when he done that, then I could see him move his arms, you know, and he was ready to shoot down at me. He didn't know I was there. He thought I was, because he see the plane, he could see the chute hanging in the tree. Boy, I reached down and got my knife, and I cut myself down, and I rolled out. He did. Then he left. He thought he got me.
After we landed and we were so damn dispersed and away from where we belonged, I don't know where, I couldn't go to the map and tell you where I landed. All I can tell you is that I wasn't anywhere near 101st people. I don't even know where the people out of my plane landed in relation to me.
The scattered drops create so much confusion that they didn't know where our center of activities was or what we were doing. This was further compounded by dropping dummy parachutists. Now, I never saw a dummy parachutist, but I was told they were small bodies, not man-sized, maybe 3 feet tall, and they were dropped all along the west coast of the Cherbourg Peninsula. And that, too, added to the confusion of who was where and what their actual mission was. But the Germans took a long time to recover and figure out where the attack was really coming from.
You don't know what's going on, you don't know where you are, you don't know where your friends are or who your friends are, and it's your first time that you've ever been in that kind of a situation, and so you're scared to death.
I rolled over on my back to start taking my parachute off, and here goes a string of tracers right over my head. They were probably 5 feet up, and then I hear something, and here comes some guy over, and they had issued us these little crickets as a sign and countersign. So if you cricked a cricket, that one crick meant it was the sign, and 2 cricks was the countersign. So I saw that somebody coming, I cricked, and I had to click, click. And I told the guy, you better get down. So he got down and he crawled away, and just about time he's crawling past me, that machine gunner opened up again. He says, thanks, pal, and off he went.
The first person I met turned out to be a member of the 101st Airborne. He had a cricket, you know, the metal thing that goes click, click. He was going, I was hearing this click, click all over the place, wondering what it was. And it turned out that this guy, so we had a password, so I give him a password he's supposed to answer to me, and he answered by click, click. And I didn't know anything about this click, click. It turned out to be a disaster there. Anyway, nobody was trigger happy, so he went on his way. He was disgusted. He wasn't the one I was looking for. He went away, click, click, click. And I went my own way trying to find the rest of the man I jumped with, and I eventually found them.
The officer that I connected up with was an 82nd Division person, and he sent me out to scout and this and that, just like anybody else, you know. I was out on a flank guard, myself and another man from the 82nd. His name was Murphy or Schultz or something like that. And all of a sudden, 40 feet in front of us, a machine gun opened up on the group of men. Now, these men are going up a causeway that's got water over it. There's no place to go. Thankfully, we were able to get that machine gun before they did a whole lot of damage. But we got both of them with grenades before they even knew what was happening.
I heard some Germans, and they were coming into the field from the other end. And the only thing I could do was hide in the fence row, and this one German coming down on my side, I didn't think he could see me. I was kneeled down and behind some pretty thick stuff. But all at once he must have got an outline or something, and he whirled and shot right from the hip. The first shot missed me, but the second one got me right in the hip. And I couldn't even get up. I kind of rolled out of partly out of the hedgerow, and he come over to me, and Danny heard this going on, and he worked himself way back up the hedgerow, and this guy was going to finish me off, and Dan finished him, so I gave Dan credit for saving my neck.
The squad would walk in the dark, and it goes one way. You meet a hedgerow, and you can't get through it. So you turn around, you follow it this way, that way. It seemed to me that they were going around in circles. And I remember in back of me were 2 medics, and the last one bringing up the tail was a corporal. And we were following this through the hedgerows, and at one point they stopped. at the corner of the hedgerows, and they stopped. I'd look around the corner of the hedgerows if they were still there, and come back to my position and waited. And after a while, I went around the corner. There was nobody there. They were gone. The rest of the squadron were gone. And the back of me was his two medics and the corporal. And so I talked with the corporal and decided that they didn't know what they were doing anyway. They were going on in circle in there with the hedgerows. There was no way to go straight. You couldn't get through a hedgerow. You just had to follow it until you found the way out. So we decided they didn't know where they were going. We wanted to go the other way. So I talked with the corporal. We decided to go our own way. The two medics didn't want to go with us. They left, and I never saw them again. I hope they find the rest of the platoon.
And here comes a German soldier with he had his burp gun hanging over his shoulder, his submachine gun. And I had my rifle in my hand, so I shot him. And then I shot him again, and then I threw up.
I made my way into St. Mary-Église, and everything was quiet there. I guess I was one of the first guys in there, except we had what we called pathfinders, and they went several hours ahead of our regular jump to okay the landing site for us as we came in. They had their little bleeper radios. But as I walked down the main street of one of the main streets of St. Mary-Église, which is a little village, there was a row of trees along the side, and practically every tree had a paratroop pathfinder hanging in it by his parachute. And they were all riddled with machine gun bullets and blood dripping on the sidewalk.
Our mission was really centered around St. Mary-Église. At that time, there were not a lot of roads. St. Mary-Église was a major road intersection of roads from the north, from Cherbourg, from the west, and from the south. Would be a major road hub for anybody counterattacking Utah Beach. So our role was to block all of the accesses to Utah Beach to give the beach landing forces protection until they could come up and join us.
As I walked up the street, another paratrooper came around the corner and met me. And we walked, I forget which way, but down one of the streets, and we came to another corner. He went around one way, and I went around the other. And I hadn't gone 100 feet or so until I heard a shot, and I ran back and hollered. Down the street he had gone, there he was lying on the sidewalk with a bullet through his chest, and he was breathing his last. I looked around, and I couldn't find anybody who might have done that, but down at the end of the street there was open tree area, so I imagine there was a sniper hidden in there. As I walked around the next corner, I saw one of our paratroopers sitting under the trees back in there, so I went back to see what was up. And he wasn't really sitting. The parachute was hanging on the tree, and he was in a sitting position. When I got close to him, he had a bullet hole right between his nose and his eye. Somebody had gone up and shot him with a pistol. And this was a little guy, he was about 18 years old, who had played football with me a couple of 3 weeks before in England. So it made me feel kind of sad about that.
I wouldn't go out in that glider for nothing. That was nothing but a death trap. The gliders were a good bunch of people, and they did a very fine job. We got jump pay, they didn't get jump pay.
They were airborne infantry. The main difference at that time, we had the same training, the same missions, the same goal. The main difference in our view is that they didn't get paid extra for it.
They trained pretty much like we did. And as I say, most of the gliders were ex-paratroopers. They were guys that, for some reason or other, didn't want to stay in the paratroops. So a lot of them went to the gliders because they wanted to be in a special troops. Even though they went in with those crazy plywood paper shells. And every one of them, very few of them land. They come in and they nose dive in. They hit something, then they just turn over. But
most of the guys lived. Of course, the gliders come in later, you see. They don't come in with the paratroopers. But like in Normandy, the gliders didn't come in until morning. They came in after the invasion started.
The biggest reason for bringing troops in by glider was that you were guaranteed that this unit was going to get to ground in one piece, at least all in the same place. You can load the individual down with a couple hundred pounds, you can put half a ton in the glider, and up to and including small anti-tank guns and even small vehicles. And so the very earliest organization was something like 2 airborne regiments, 1 glider regiment, and later I think it was 3 in 1 or 4 in 1. Same process, the British had glider and parachute unit mixed, and the Germans had glider and parachute units mixed in the beginning. Soviets had pioneered the use back in the 30s because the glider allowed you to put heavy weapons, at least some heavy weapons, down with the airborne troops, and that's your biggest lack. The airborne troops basically are light infantry when they land.
There was 2 types of gliders. The American glider was called a CG-4A. It held 12 men, pilot and a co-pilot, and they were made of aluminum pipes and fabric. English gliders were huge gliders. They were like a size of a B-24, and they were made of paper and plywood. They were ugly looking things.
The British gliders were a little bit better because they were larger. They were built to break in two when they landed. They were intended to break in two. So when they landed, they broke apart. It gave egress from the two halves. The glider just broke apart, so there was no problem in people getting out of the glider.
We took off that morning. I was riding an English glider which had 29 people in it, pilot, co-pilot, and 2 carrier pigeons. We took off without incident. We went over the channel. We flew over the beaches at 900 feet at daylight, just breaking day. I'll never forget those 10 seconds that we flew over those beaches. Because I was standing behind the pilots. I wasn't belted in. And I was watching, well, just a few seconds going over the beaches, but I'll never forget it.
Well, it wasn't, it's not very far, 20 miles, 25, 30 miles maybe at the most where we went across. We released at the correct height, and what we hadn't noticed in the photographs was that the poplar trees that were surrounding the fields were there. But in the photograph, we didn't see them. I'm to find out later that the Germans had gone in and cut all the limbs off, or had them cut off, so they wouldn't show up in high altitude aerial photographs. But they were take your wings off if you have. So you had to go over the top of those and still get to the ground and still get the thing stopped. Just before we hit the ground, the lieutenant in back of me hit me in the back. It's a nice landing, and he knocked my helmet up over my face. So I didn't get the glider straightened out. Now this all happened so fast, and I think this is about what it was. We hit the ground going a little bit sideways, maybe not 45 degrees, but enough to shear the landing gear off. Well, it turned out to be a good move, because all the glider did was make a ground loop, and it stopped real quick. It tore it up pretty well, so it was uneventful. Some of the fellows didn't have such good luck. They ran into the hedgerows, and some of them didn't come out very well.
The problem with the gliders in Normandy, of course, is that there isn't a lot of open land to land in. And there were huge casualties, accident casualties in the glider troops. And of course, the glider pilots were just about considered themselves expendable as soon as they cut loose, because their chance of surviving was, well, if you hit anything, the first thing that happened was the whole nose of the glider collapsed, and that went the pilot. And in the Normandy and the hedgerows and the woods and everything, you had to be very careful.
Our tow plane, which was a C-47, it was shot down. So we had to land, and we didn't land anywhere near where we were supposed to land. The area where we landed was hedgerow country, little bit of plots. Our glider landed, crash landed, went into a bunch of trees. I fell out. 29 people were killed. I was the only survivor.
Normally, we were told we would become ground soldiers when we got on the ground. Most of us thought, well, hey, we did our job. We reported to headquarters, and they told us, yeah, we had done our job, and we were to get back to Utah Beach. And they were short of glider pilots, and I guess they used all of them on D-Day. So we were told to get back the best and quickest way we could.
We landed among German soldiers. They were as scared as we were, and tried to find an outfit. Most of the officers were killed. It was bedlam for a day or two till we got straightened around. And I think I've often told the people that I've talked to, I said the biggest problem we had, the Germans wanted to surrender, and we had to have a compound to take these German prisoners. There was rifles, grenades, anything you wanted to find on the ground, arms of any kind. We spent the hardest part of our time, the first few days, was disarming the French people. Because they would grab these rifles or whatever it was, and they would indiscriminately just shoot the Germans.
We missed a turn, probably, a lot of crossroads in that area. We saw a walled small city, and we started to go into the town, and a Frenchman had come out and he was waving his hands, and so we stopped, and he finally got across to us that the town had not been liberated yet. So we were probably lucky that I don't know this, but he said it was still occupied by the enemy. And had we gone into the town, we may have ended up in not too good a shape.
So we spent 30 days in Normandy, just as assault troops. The one day I can vividly remember I was sitting in a small ditch with the battalion commander, a company commander, which was a captain, and a radio operator and myself. And we were watching the troops advance across this valley. And I got tired standing there, so I walked around the corner of the ditch, and I was maybe 10, 15 feet from them. An artillery shell came in and killed all three of them. I was the only one alive out of that mess. So then I had to go report back that our commander had been killed, our company commander had been killed, our radio, we didn't have any radio. And so it was a matter then of first sergeant, staff sergeant, tech sergeant taking over until we got officers. So I was lucky again. In fact, my middle name was Lucky, I think.
Their initial drops really are, despite all the problems they encounter, overwhelmingly successful. The 82nd and 101st, for all the confusion of their drops, I mean, the confusion of their drops probably add to their success. The Germans are unable to ever figure out exactly what's going on there until it's probably too late. The airborne is able to capture the important choke points and secure the important exits from Utah Beach. So all of that goes real well. The airborne is then reassembled, and although the original plan was to pull them out pretty quickly, they end up staying in Normandy for quite a bit longer. They had some still pretty strong units, and those were committed to the real grinding infantry fighting that was necessary to enlarge the beachhead.
The most amazing thing with all the incredibly detailed planning that, as far as I can tell, nobody had planned for the bocage.
Some of those hedgerows were solid dirt 6 or 8 feet high with brambles on top, and then they might have been 8 or 10 feet thick. So they were a formidable barrier. They were favorable for the Germans who knew the area and knew where all the roads were, and it was a great defensive location to be in. But for those of us to have to attack or move through the hedgerows, it was very difficult.
Nobody had talked to anybody that had actually been to Normandy, and Lord knows there were plenty of people in Britain that had been to Normandy, and asked about the terrain, that once we're off the beach, how are we going to be able to maneuver and advance, even though the planning was for a very slow advance. It's still, what are the peculiarities of this terrain? Because it is peculiar, it is unique. Nothing, until they ran into it. And then suddenly it was, oh my, this whole new tactical problem, which the American Army solved very quickly, but it was a bloody solution.
Hedgerow fighting was very difficult. It was an awful lot to ask a guy to say, okay, I want you to go and scout out this next hedgerow, because the chances of him coming back were very slim. Boy, when you encountered hedgerows, you knew darn well it wasn't going to move very fast.
Some Germans had made a little invasion into the area, and we went out to see what we could do with them. Eventually we came to a hedgerow, and we were fired upon from the hedgerow, so we turned the fire and dashed over to it. And there were some foxholes on this side of the hedgerow. Some Germans popped out of that, surrendered, and the others were on the other side of it. I remember one of the guys went down the hedgerow and stuck his gun through to look for something, and the German grabbed the gun and pulled it from his arms and shot him. And I remember also one of the privates asking the lieutenant, what should we do with these prisoners? And he said, take them over there and shoot them.
We started running from hedgerow to hedgerow. And one shot rang out, and the guy that was running with me, he took 1-2 steps, and then he fell. And I stopped to see if he was, if I could help him. And there was a hole in the helmet on this side, and it went through his head and bulged the helmet on this side.
So we were looking straight ahead, and up out of the middle of a hedgerow, right out of the hedgerow, like a pot blind a duck hunter would have, dug right down through the hedgerow. Here comes a German helmet. And he's looking diagonally to his left, and we were to his right. So he goes up with his Tommy gun. I go with my carbine. I wasn't shooting, but I hit John in the butt with it. But as I did, he blasted that Tommy gun and tore that poor guy's head to smithereens.
Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a gap in the hedgerow the Germans were running past on the other side. So I ran out in the middle of the field, and as they came through that gap, I started picking them off. That was my my second human being to kill, which I wouldn't ever brag about. But I don't know how many I had shot before some sniper got me, hit me right here, and I don't even remember being hit, but I do remember lying on my back and seeing the clouds go by, and I was just kind of in dreamland until the pain came.
They sent up tank dozers, and you've heard of the tank dozer, tank with a bulldozer blade on the front to break through the hedgerows. And we moved on out from there to the end of the hedgerow area. That was about the end of our action. We moved from there back to near Cherbourg and waited to be shipped back to England.
The U.S. divisions in Normandy, for the most part, did extremely well. The airborne had an advantage in that they were picked troops. They were volunteer troops for the most part, and that gave them a somewhat higher quality of manpower. It made them a bit more aggressive. I think the infantry was more aggressive in the airborne. You've got to be pretty aggressive to jump out of an airplane into enemy fires. You put those together, and you've kind of got a recipe for a combat edge that a lot of other infantry divisions didn't have.
We were trained, I think, more thoroughly than the regular troops were. Our uniforms were distinctive, and we had the elan that we were the best, and we were brainwashed, I think. I use the word brainwashed because we were led to believe, and we led everybody else to believe that we were better than anybody else. So it was a matter of brainwashing, I think. But I still believe I was better than anybody else.
I'm proud of the part I took. I am, but I wouldn't make it out as being unusually spectacular. I just did what everybody else in my unit did. We all did our job. We all did it right. We all did it well. And I think we were in a special unit. I think we were special troops. I think there's something special about a paratrooper group.
Even if the only thing the airborne had ever done was the Normandy drop, they earned their keep for the whole war with the Normandy drop, because the Allies couldn't win the war without making a secure lodgment on the European continent in Northwest Europe. And the airborne played an essential part of that invasion. And even if we just raised those divisions for no purpose other than making that one drop, they earned their keep, because at that point they became a strategic instrument, essential to the successful prosecution of the war. What more can you ask of a unit than that?
When you envision that on D-Day that 6,000 guys from the 101st and 6,000 from the 82nd came floating out of the sky in the middle of the night down on the Germans, you know, that was a tremendous event that'll never happen again. And combat and armaments have got so much more sophisticated that the day of a paratrooper is long gone.